So we know salvation, no matter what, in what dispensation, did not save. Right?
Say that again.
Works in no dispensation means to salvation. It's kind of rearranged the word. Works is still not a means of salvation, no matter, well,
But I can see where people think that the works of
yes.
the law. Because when I first read this and they said that it was misleading, I'm like, huh? You know, because you automatically have that mindset of,
They had to keep the law.
yeah,
But the reason they had to keep the law, that was their expression of faith, that they believed what God had already told them.
yeah.
If you believe me, this is what you're gonna do. This is what you need to do. This is the way to prove that you love me and believe me. Not that it saved them. They were already believing. And we'll get into all that. I'm trying not to go too far ahead because he covers the area. But no salvation in works, no matter what this is. Okay. Principles of God.
Principle, as we have used the word above, is settled rule of morality or conduct. We respect men with principles, men who stand for the right, whatsoever the cost. God, of course, has the very highest principles and never deviates from them. He always did and always will hate sin. Sin always was and always will be contrary to his holy nature. In no age has this been any less so than in any other age. In like manner, God always did and always will delight in righteousness, mercy, and love. God never has and never will deviate in the slightest degree from these principles.
The principle of law or justice, for example, has continued unchanged through the ages. No matter what the dispensation, when wrong is done, God's sense of justice is offended. This may be simply demonstrated by three scriptural examples. Cain lived before the dispensation of the law by nature. Did he, although the written law had not yet been given. David lived under the law that did trouble over it with God. Would the fact that Christ bore our sins on Calvary make murder any more right? Would God look upon it as less sinful?
You say, David on this ground. But does not the very fact that David's sins and ours were paid for, rather than overlooked, prove that the principles of law and justice are by one passage of scripture, Romans chapter 6. Abraham lived before the dispensation of the law. How was he justified? Abraham believed God
under the law, how was he justified? David also describeth the blessedness of the man after the law, under the dispensation of grace. How are we justified? To him that worketh not, but believeth on him that justifieth, his faith is counted for righteousness. Romans 4:5. Now, in the cases of Abraham and David, works were required for salvation, whereas in our case, works for salvation are distinctly forbidden. Yet it is clear from the passages above that Abraham, David, and we were all saved essentially by grace through faith, and that works as such have never had any saving value.
Okay. Anything in that section? David, works were required for salvation, whereas in our case, works for salvation are distinctly forbidden.
Well, Abraham got his direct. He had to go out and do what the Lord asked him to do. So he was working, but the Lord told him to have that to do. So I would say as far as works, he got his direction right from the Lord to do those things. I can't speak on David because I don't know too.
And I think the word required is what makes it kind of hard to, required, well, until after we're saved. Theirs was proof that they believed it. I mean, just like with Abraham. He believed God and it was imputed unto him for righteousness. Count the stars. See, this is how big your inheritance is going to be. Your seed is going to grow. Look at the sands of the seas. That's the number, the work that was the expression of faith. We believe on him. And there's really no works tied to that expression of faith. But we work because he loved us and we love him in return. And we want to please him. So there's not a real expression of faith except for believing in dispensation grace. Just when there's no works required for salvation, even though there's works required as an expression of faith.
I think that's where people struggle, is if you oversimplify and just make general broad statements and then you have to back up and re-explain. That can be difficult for someone who's not familiar with the doctrine. That's many of the same things he said in this chapter, just much more flippantly and much more, they paint with a much broader brush to say what they want to say. Some people say, well, we think that once your actions would be different, and they use the other side of that coin and say, well, if you don't look different and you don't act different and you do anything outside of what's acceptable to Christ, well, then that's evidence that you don't have it. Just as simple as the statement is, and breaking it down any farther might make it the simplest statement. A lot of these doctrines you can only take down so far. When you take it one step farther, it's like, well, now the water's getting more blurry rather than more clear. So.
And that we'll expect, we want it to be right, we expect it right away. That's a learning process, just like anything. He convicts me of doing the wrong things, and I realize those aren't pleasing to him, so that I start coming away from it. I stop doing those things. So it's until they realize that those things were wrong, that's what they could, that's what, as they also. I didn't realize this isn't pleasing to him. So I've got to stop doing these things, and it's a gradual.
And I think to a great degree, if you back that up the nation at that time, nowadays, they understood that they cannot do these things now because it affects their tax. But the challenge that comes with that is, and you see it today, they have no idea why. Do whatever you want to do, it don't matter. So you have to know what the Spirit says is right or wrong, because you can find a church, a group of people, a set of friends that'll tell you that whatever you're doing is right. You have grown to that rather than just, well, this is what I need to look like, sound like, act like. So there's have grown spiritually since the day they started. Or you can have people that you want someone to get saved and like hit someone over the head and you can't even really, in this situation, lead the horse to water. You can tell them what the truth is. You can expose them to really unpopular. I told her that I had no real impact on her, and that's a frustrating thing as a Christian. And I said, if you think that's frustrating, wait until someone is saved. Yeah, I was like, well, think about the thousands of people that think that about us. They just want to reach out and grab us and say, why are you smart enough to do it this way? It's no one's at the same spot at the same time, it seems like. And the areas that might be your strength that you feel like you grow the quickest in, there's probably an area of weakness where we potentially have the most growth. It's just the hardest area for us. That idea that dispensational doctrine don't like the idea different at the same time either. And that's, you just kind of have to know that those arguments and those conversations are coming from the same direction. I can't remember the question, but these fellows are going going back and forth about salvation and about your action works. And if you did this, would you still go to heaven? And people agree that you would still go to heaven because you're saved by grace, but there's always this but, comma, statement. And watch out this. There are times when he makes statements that say required for salvation, comma, whereas in our case, and I think that's sort of a get it is clear explanation of what he means by that is those are the important areas to put that is, or the thing we gotta remember is, or the thing that I'm gonna add to what the Bible says is, that's what you gotta hear when that next little stuff off.
All part of it. I mean, that's. You always have to watch for the buts that come with it. Yeah, but what? His word is either his word or it's not his word. Oh, yeah, see, that's not right. Yeah. But it is. Yes, salvation is salvation. There's no losing it, no matter what you do. But that's where rewards and judgment come in, and the importance of, all those types of things in service for him. I get credit for it, because it was all God given to him. So that's the way ours is going to be. I can't take any credit for any of this. I just followed you and did what you said to do. You did it. So thank you that you allowed me to do this for you, and here's your review. So it's one of those, so it's like, the more good you do and the more you follow him, the more you are submissive unto him, then the greater the rewards are that you're going to receive. And those are the rewards you can return to him. That's what you want to do. Lord, praise and more honor and glory for what you've done in my life, because you did it all. Here's more. I'm trying to praise you. You used me and you gave me these rewards. Now let me return to you, because you are. So it's all that stuff that goes together. Salvation is effective. Still, the salvation of the soul,
Thinking that you have to have more positive check marks in your life than more negative, and the psychology that goes into how you live your life because of that, versus I'm doing this only because I think how you live your life is going to make a difference. Not everyone wants to grow their hair out super long and not wear makeup and not paint their fingernails, but if you had to do that as your expression of faith, if you had to be submissive to a loving to his word, but rather because someone was putting you under a burden and under a shackle to make you do it, that's a different life. And when you understand, well, you could do anything you want to do, but because you love him, this is the way you freedom who you are as a Christian, and it really impacts the joy that you have, the experience that you have with Christ. And you say, well, at the end of the day, they're still doing the same things. Well, they are, but they're very different paths to get there. That's where it matters how you get from point A to point B in his word, because everybody can get you to the cross and everybody can get you to heaven. But the process of how they do it from point A to point B to point C, it's going to impact the way you walk balances of what's really going on. What does that statement mean? Those are that are difficult to kind of pause in the middle of a sermon and say, well, here's what I mean by that, and then not have that sermon be 4 hours long.
and that's another reason we're reading it instead of now we're going to go over questions. So for the 3 examples, the faith was what did the saving, their faith in what God taught them. And just like when we get order into Acts 2, repent and be baptized for the remission of sin, that faith that they believed what God had done. That's what he taught them. That was a requirement. I mean, those are just all things that, and like I said, I've read ahead, so it's like, double checking what I want to catch, and it's like, I keep bringing it back, so I've got to stop that if I can. Anything else in that section? Okay. The dispensations of God. What is a dispensation?
While the principles of God have to do with his character, his nature, dispensation dispensations of God, considered away from dispensationalism by the length of the word itself, being sent out. The word dispensation, which then means the act of dispensing or dealing out, or dispense or dealt out. There are medical dispensaries, for example. Medicines are dispensed to the poor. Sometimes these dispensations are conducted on a particular day of each week. Now such follow from this that a dispensation is a period of 12 and nothing but periods of time. Indeed, one of the greatest Bible teachers of the passage of time, during which man is tested in respect of obedience to some, for a dispensation is not a period, but the act of dealing out, or that which is dealt out. The Bible teacher above referred to doubtless meant that a dispensation covers a period of time.
The word always translated thus. In Ephesians chapter 3, verse 2, for example, Paul writes of a dispensation of the grace of God, which is given me to youward. Just as the dispensation of the grace of God was committed to Paul. The organic meaning of the original word for dispensation, that word, is house management. The word is translated stewardship in the Authorized Version. This is interesting because the word steward was the head one into whose hands the management of the house was committed. He dealt out the money for the household necessities, dispensed the food and clothing to the servants and children, dispenser goods, and of the business of the household.
Thus we read in Luke 12:42, it said, "Who then is that gave them their portion of meat in due season?" In Luke 16:1 and 2, where again the words oikonomos and oikonomia are translated steward and stewardship, we have the same idea. And he said also unto his disciples, and he called him and said unto him, How is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. In 1 Corinthians, but once more it conveys the same idea. For though I preach the gospel to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me, yea, woe is unto me if I gospel. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward, but even if against my will, I must do it, for a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me.
Note that in each of these cases, the idea of responsibility is involved. It was a faithful and one he had wasted his goods. Necessity or responsibility was laid upon Paul because a dispensation of the gospel had been committed unto him. One of the clearest passages of all in this connection is found in 1 Corinthians 4:1, where the Apostle Paul says, Let a man so account of us as of the ministers, servants of Christ, and stewards, dispensers of the mysteries of God. More.
Let us get this meaning of the word dispensation clearly fixed in our minds. When we see that a dispensation involves responsibility, rather than merely devoting a period of time, we will see.
And you wonder, well, how could the age of grace be going on at the exact same moment? The kingdom and that crossover period, this is that section that I feel like clearly defines how that could be. Because if you've been led down the dispensation of the kingdom, and that's your responsibility direction, and meanwhile someone else simultaneously is led to teach of grace, you can start to see how those two windows of time can cross. Start, finish. It looks simple when we read through the Bible in some areas, but when it crosses over, I think this is a good way to enlighten how that can happen.
If you want. Most of these are King James.
That's right.
If they're not, I want to make sure you don't. I mean, that's just like what's in parentheses. Here, for first point, 4, 1, and 2. Let every man so account of us as Christ and stewards of the ministries of God. Those words are in the Bible, but he's using those as his explanation where he's talking about, been talking before about a steward, and that ministers are stewards, and that or ministers are servants, and as stewards are dispensers. I mean, he's just trying to help you see that. So, yeah, if we need to read it, okay, if we're gonna take the time to read each one of these, go find them, and
Well, you can have someone designated to read.
and I thought about doing that myself. I mean, I could go through and have them all already marked and ready, and it's like, okay, thanks. I mean, a lot of them back for whenever he used to use them, really was ESV, I think is one of them he used, the extended version. He'll mark it as ESV. Like I said, that's the biggest thing I have against this book is he includes those, and those are the ones I want to make sure they're still saying what he's, so, yeah. No. I started doing it earlier and didn't get it made out like I planned on, so. Let's just double check these, see if there is any change in any word that's, you know. So everything fine in that section?
It must be evident to the most casual reader, obvious to that Adam and Eve had enjoyed fellowship with God, dwelling in